Hey y'all, it's Fran with Into the Marvelous Light. Welcome in today, all of God's chosen children. How does the narcissist treat you when you're sick? Let's talk about that in today's video. They have a lack of empathy, so they won't have very much empathy or sympathy for you. They will pretty much ignore you because if it's not about the narcissist, it's not about anything. They don't really care about other things outside of themselves. They feel like they're most important. They feel like they should be the priority and they should be on a pedestal at all times. They feel like you are beneath them and anything that is going on with you is of little importance. They feel like any and all focus that's on you means that they get little to no attention, and that's a no-no in their book. So I want to tell you the story of the time when I was literally on my deathbed. I was admitted into the hospital with a life-threatening condition. Many people have died from this condition. My mom almost died from it as well. So I'm not really sure exactly what caused this particular circumstance to happen to me. It could have been caused by a fall. I did fall on some cement um, just from sheer exhaustion, or it could have been caused by some hereditary circumstances. Not really sure. But what happened to me was all of a sudden I started to limp and I started to have pain in one of my legs. And I assumed that maybe I sprained a muscle or something like that because that's kind of what it felt like. And it got progressively worse to the point where I was limping and I could barely walk. So the pain got so bad that I actually went to the emergency room to try to figure out what was going on. And they felt like it was a sprained muscle. And so they were about to give me some crutches and send me on my way. And the spirit spoke to me and told me to let them know what happened to my mom. So when I was a preteen, my mom developed a blood clot in her leg and it traveled, up her body and got into her lungs. And lo and behold, the same thing happened to me. So I tell the nurses and the staff, right when they were getting ready to send me home, I told them my mom had had a blood clot. And they all looked at each other and their eyes got pretty big. And they said, let's get you upstairs. And so they take me upstairs. They do an ultrasound on my leg and they say, it's a blood clot. And by that time, it had already broken off into pieces and got in my lungs. So it was only a matter of time before my lungs would start to shut down. Thanks be unto God. Now, I'm at the hospital by myself. The narcissist did not come with me. He just figured, oh, you just have a sprained muscle. It's no big deal. You can drive yourself to the hospital. So as soon as the staff tell me that I have a blood clot, I bust out crying. I was super scared because all I could think about was how my mom had experienced the same thing and how she was near death. And I was very scared. So I call the narcissist and I'm crying hysterically and I'm telling him, that they're going to admit me to the hospital. I'm not going to be able to come home. I have to stay here. And they have to try to dissolve this blood clot. They call it deep vein thrombosis. So I had that. And I also had what's called a pulmonary embolism, meaning that it had traveled to my lungs already. So I try to explain what's going on to the narcissist, and he feels like I am exaggerating or making things up. And I'm trying to explain to him there's no reason they would admit me into the hospital if this wasn't serious. This isn't a sprained muscle. And I'm trying my best to explain this to him. And all he can say to me is, I'm in the middle of cooking dinner and I'm not sure if I can come up there to the hospital. So by this time, I'm even more upset because I don't have the support that I'm looking for or that I'm seeking. And so I basically just disconnect the call. And I find out that he calls back, the narcissist calls back to the hospital, and he's speaking with the staff. And he asks them, is what's going on with me, is it important enough? These are his exact words. Is it important enough for him to come up to the hospital? I can't believe that he is asking complete strangers if he should or how important it is for him to come see his own wife in the hospital. It's just beyond my comprehension. I can't understand it. I will never really be able to understand how someone that took a vow to love you doesn't actually love you. How a person that you see every day, day in and day out, that you're around for years, you share pretty much everything with, they don't love you. They don't have the ability to show you any love, especially when you need it most. I'm getting all sorts of tests and imaging ran on me to try to figure out how much of this clot has broken off and traveled to different parts of my body. They're making sure that it didn't get past my lungs and go elsewhere, it didn't get in my brain and that kind of thing. So I'm getting all this test done. They won't allow me to move very much because they don't want the clot to move. And it did move while I was in the hospital. So it started off in my calf and then it traveled up to behind my knee. And this is the largest part of the clot. So pretty much got stuck and wedged behind my knee. And they were able to stabilize it in that spot. And so they were giving me blood thinners to try to break up this clot and bust it up. And I could actually feel the clot busting up from the medication, and it was painful. It's quite painful. They did have to put me on some pain medication to manage that pain. It's very frustrating to have to explain to your own spouse, the person that you care deeply about, the person that you love, but they don't care about you and they don't love you back. It's very hard to explain to them that this is a matter of life and death, that this could go either way. You can either come home or not come home. You could either live or die. You shouldn't have to try to explain that to a person that loves you. I feel like the love itself, if it's really true, that love would have that person by your side, period. So not only am I in the hospital literally fighting for my life, I'm also grieving and upset, feeling like I have to fight the fight alone, feeling that I have a spouse or a husband, but they're obsolete. I'm just married, but it doesn't mean anything. So I'm going through sadness on top of sadness in the hospital. My family's 5 hours away, and I'm in the hospital alone. I had members of my church to come to see me before my spouse ever showed up at the hospital. I was in the hospital for about 2 or 3 days before my spouse even showed up. And I feel like the only reason he showed up is because someone in his family urged him to come to see me. So my mother-in-law called the hospital to check on me to see how I was doing. And for some reason, when I heard her voice and she was asking me, was I okay? I busted out crying. And I asked her, I said, does your son even love me? And I just couldn't talk anymore after that. And next I knew it, the narcissist shows up at the hospital. I wanted to tell the staff not to let him in, but once he told them that, he was my spouse, they went ahead and let him up. But I was so mad, so upset, so hurt. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to look at him. His behavior is total opposite of mine. If he would have went to the dentist to get a tooth pulled, I would be there. I would be there for the smallest and simplest of things that he needed help with, support with. I would be by his side. I wouldn't have hesitation. And to know that there was a possibility of him not ever seeing me again and he still didn't come to the hospital right away, that really, really had me in a low place. I remember praying to God in the hospital, asking him to spare my life. I told God that I wanted to have children. I said I wanted to live so that I could have children. And after about a week to a week and a half in the hospital, I was able to go home. They had reduced the clot down from the size of a quarter to the size of a dime. And so I was able to go home and continue a regimen of blood thinners to continue to reduce the size of the clot. Then they would continue to monitor me and check on me to make sure the clot was indeed shrinking. When I got home from the hospital, it was almost like the narcissist was upset with me. He ignored me quite a bit and he acted as if I annoyed him. Now, I still have this blood clot lodged behind my knee, so I'm not able to move very much, and the doctors don't want me to move very much. I pretty much had to roll a wheelchair around in my house, in the rental house at that time, but nevertheless, had to roll the chair around because I couldn't get the narcissist to do much for me. He would huff and puff every time I asked him, if he could get me some water or, get me some fruit, different things like that. He was not, you know, happy to wait on me in any way, to accommodate me in any way. He was super annoyed, even to the point to where he left me in the house by myself to fend for myself. St. John 11:4. When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." And that's exactly how I feel. My sickness wasn't unto death, but it was definitely a reason to praise God and be very thankful and grateful that He spared my life. Because if it had not been for God on my side, where would I be? James 5:15. And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Chosen ones, continue to thank God for the good things that He has given us. He has done great things. Bless His holy name. Great is His faithfulness, and His mercies are new every morning. When you look back over your life, thank the Lord for always shining His light upon you. Walk in that marvelous light.